Welcome to It's All Interventional. Today we're going to go back to anatomy and physiology to clarify a term that's interesting, is a little confusing still for those both in and out of the cath lab. We're going to look at the infamous LHC. So back when I was a new grad in radiology, I had the opportunity to go and work in IR. Fantastic opportunity there. Well, it was a small hospital. We only had 2 labs back to back. And a tech in one room would answer the phone, say, cath lab. But that same tech in the other room would answer the phone, specials. Well, I really didn't do a whole lot of rotations inside cath lab and didn't know much was going on in the cath lab, just knew it had to do with hearts. But I didn't really understand the big differences. Well, in IR, I'd stop for a while and go visit next door, look at the cath lab. And on their schedule board was the LHC, LHC, LHC. Did a lot of LHC procedures. When I moved to another town, bigger hospital, a lot more cath lab rooms, I still worked in IR, but went to go visit the cath lab. Went over there. I thought I found things that I was still familiar with. LHC, LHC, LHC written all over the schedule boards. Several years later, I began doing some contract work for a coding company, looking at all kinds of IR cases. They eventually asked if I wanted to do some cath lab cases too. I said, absolutely. Just need to know how to do the cath lab cases. Now, keep in mind, this is about 15 or 20 years ago, long before major bundling of codes came about. I think the cath lab code's big change was in 2010. So when I look at these codes for heart cath procedures, I hadn't really seen a lot of heart cath procedures. I kind of knew what was going on, but I hadn't really been involved with the cases. But they had codes for injecting the left ventricle and a code for the ventriculogram. There are codes for injecting coronary arteries and a coronary arteriogram code. And then there's another code for a left heart cath. And this is where I got stumped. Now, I'm sure you're saying, Scott, you are a total moron. And normally I would agree with you. But even today, even though we don't charge or code the same way as we did 15, 20 years ago, there's still a lot of confusion of how we name, when we call, we schedule procedures when in the cath lab. Things about a left heart cath. Is it really? So if you're a student or a new grad or a new hire, then this might be really good to pay attention to and learn from my mistakes. First of all, I learned that an LHC on the schedule board does not mean that the patient is scheduled for or is going to have a left heart cath. And even though LHC is a specific and definable term, it's also used a lot as slang for basically an angio of one or more parts of the heart. What confused me was there were 2 codes for doing an LV gram, putting a catheter into the heart, injecting that catheter, and the interpretation of that. And then another code for a left heart catheterization. Well, it was the hemodynamic monitoring and pressures of the left heart. That's what I didn't understand at the time. Putting the catheter in the left side of the heart is not necessarily called a left heart cath, although we are catheterizing the left side of the heart. These codes were defined for doing the hemodynamic diagnostic interpretation of the pressures and measurements of the left side of the heart, and then 2 different codes for the LV gram. And here's what I didn't understand. Just like the right heart cath, you put your catheter in the right side of the heart, you take your pressures and your measurements. Well, putting that catheter in the heart is to get somewhere, but it's that hemodynamic monitoring, the diagnostic studies taken from the pressures inside that heart, the samples inside that heart, left side and right heart, that make it a heart cath procedure. It's not the injections, it's not the imaging, it's putting the catheter in and doing something in that side of the heart. Putting your catheter in and doing measurements on the left side of the heart is a left heart catheterization. The left heart catheterization is a procedure performed to diagnose disease of the heart muscle or the valves by measuring the pressures of and blood flow of the heart. See, I thought the heart cath was just a vehicle to get to the left heart. I didn't understand that the cath was the procedure itself. A huge blessing is that these codes changed about a decade or so ago. But even though they've been simplified, there's still a lot of room for error for these procedures. Your angio procedure is not a left heart cath unless a catheter, usually but not always a pigtail, crosses the aortic valve and goes into the left ventricle or the left atrium. You might do pressures of just the ventricle, or maybe you're doing across the valve or both, but you're there and you go into the left heart on purpose to do something. In normal anatomy, if you don't cross the aortic valve, you didn't do a left heart cath, period. Of course, that's different if you're doing a left heart cath from the right side and cross the septum. Different scenario. If you did right and left coronary artery angiogram and you didn't cross the aortic valve, it's not a left heart cath. Go change your board to say cores only. The 2022 CPT code book, page 765, states left heart catheterization involves catheter placement in the left-sided cardiac chambers and includes left ventricular angiography, imaging, supervision, and interpretation when performed. What's really interesting about these new codes is that you used to get 2 chargeable procedures for an LV gram, but now your LV gram when performed with your left heart cath is included, nothing extra. And this brings up an interesting point about productivity. Before the codes changed in 2010, you would get 5 chargeable procedures for a left heart cath with LV gram and cores. But today you get only 1. And here's a side note, we're going to have a discussion on productivity sometime in the future. So if you know how your department counts productivity, please leave it in the comments below. Now, there's lots of ways to count how your productivity is done, through procedures, through patients, all sorts of different ways. But it seems like every year the codes change, the RVUs change, and no matter what happens, your productivity is going to get screwed. So let's have a good discussion about productivity down the road. The big takeaway today is, even if your schedule board says LHC on it, unless you cross the aortic valve, you did not, and you're not going to be doing a left heart cath. We're going to get to more depth about how to charge procedures like the heart cath and related procedures down the road in another video. But for today, if this video is helpful to you, if you learn anything, please do like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out. If you didn't get anything out of this one, but you got a good laugh out of my ignorance, go ahead and like and subscribe as well, please. Thanks for taking your time with me today again. Special Scott. Hey, I got to go for now, but I'll see you next time on It's All Interventional.